Folks, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show. As I return from the East Coast, I make a solemn commitment again to dedicate this year to the Year of the Woman musician, and I have an opportunity to introduce someone who has continued to create and have a career for the last 5 decades or so. Prolific studio musician, and Harriet, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Well, thank you. I think it's only 4 decades, but I'm happy to continue through 5 and maybe 6.
Yeah. Okay. So 4. Oh, I mean, it's like early 70s, 80s, 90s. To me, it's like we're on the other side of this decade. So, in any event, it's good to round off. But it's an honor to have you on the show.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
Harriet, can you talk to the audience about the most significant live musical experience earlier in your career that you felt helped you develop your individual voice?
Wow, that's an interesting question. Well, I started playing the piano at 4 years old. My father was a dermatologist and a musician. And he sort of taught me to play by ear. He would tell me which chord, and eventually I would say, I know, you know. And so I was an English major in college. I just did music on the side. It never occurred to me that I could be a songwriter as a living. So but I wrote poetry, and I played the piano, and I wrote the skits that, we would enter into competition in school, and we would win, and I thought, gosh, this is fun, but I guess I have to actually get a job. So I was in advertising briefly as a copywriter for a couple of years before I could make a living as a songwriter, but what actually happened probably is, it's hard to pinpoint one thing, but I grew up listening to the records you could get at the grocery store of all the Broadway shows. So I listened to shows, and I also listened to, Rodgers and Hart, Cole Porter, that sort of thing. So lyrically, I was reared on the standards. Musically, Ray Charles was my greatest influence.
I want to just, because you said something interesting there. I mean, a lot of the cats today, younger cats, they just don't have a big bag of songs. The fact that you learned the standards, what was the first time that you were able to do those standards in a live setting on a consistent basis to get comfortable developing your voice in front of other people?
I see. Well, no, I never performed standards live. I only listened to standards when I was growing up.
I see. Okay. Yeah, you played your own stuff. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I just wasn't sure if you had like a bar gig or something. I mean, just some kind of gig because. Well, anyway, continue.
Yeah. So, I grew up listening to the standards and the Broadway shows and things like that, and then, in pop music, I was most probably influenced by Ray Charles and Aretha and people like that, because it was odd. I felt that I had 2 mothers, one white and one black. The white one was all too nervous to listen to the radio, but the black one was listening to Ray Charles and Aretha. So that's the music I heard, and that's what influenced me. And I heard Ray say one time in an interview in a documentary about Quincy Jones. They interviewed Ray Charles and said, what is soul music? And he said, anything that's authentic can be soul music. So I ran with that.
I dig that.
Yeah. And so when I first started playing out, I played in gay clubs. It was the only place in the 70s you could play original material. So I developed a following there. And I wrote songs, and I think my voice just emerged from what I was writing in the 70s. I had all the normal influences of Carole King, Joni Mitchell, Bob Dylan, but I really think my voice started growing when I was much younger, and so it just emerged. I like melody. I don't, it's very hard for me now to listen to this much repetition. I like melody that develops, and I like lyrics that have something to say and don't repeat 100 times.
And do you find that it's like you can attribute that to technology, or do you think it's just not? I mean, I guess all I'm saying is the last 2 decades we've had digital beats crushed into the ears of kids, and so even like simple, just that endless backbeat, very little, organic, creative melody development, lyrics. I mean, I don't know, like I've never. Some of the cheesiest lyrics I love the most. So I mean, although the storytelling and the authenticity of the storytelling, I mean, they're much more interested in. It's much more visual, so they're much more interested in the superficial part of it. That's my generation. That's the truth. And so, I guess all I'm saying is the gay bar. People were giving you a lot of recognition about the fact that they thought you were an originalist. So you got a lot of confidence from that. Is that right?
Yeah, of course. I mean, people came to see me week after week, and I started talking to the audience because they were not there to see the white chick at the piano. They were there for other reasons. And so if I was going to get these people interested, I was going to have to talk to them and get them enrolled in the song. So I would create a mystery for which the song would be the answer to that mystery, and they started listening, and then I developed the style of actually introducing every song. And I think some people come to my shows for that as much as they do the songs themselves.
Why do they come? Tell me again. What is this skill that you? What is? So it's more of a stage presence, stage entertainment.
No, I'm a storyteller. Before the song, I present a mystery of their life. I get them enrolled in the song by introducing the song with something that they need to figure out, and the song is the answer. Like, people who are in a relationship where a certain thing is happening, and then they think, oh, well, maybe this is the answer, and the song is the answer. You see, it tricks them into listening to original material.
Yeah, it's very smart. When did you cultivate that? When did that come about in your repertoire?
Well, in the 70s, because I was, thrown in like at the deep end, and I didn't know how to swim. The only place I could play was someplace where they weren't there to listen to me. So I had to figure out how to get them to listen to me, Luckily now when I perform, they're there to see me, but believe me, that wasn't the way it was in the 70s.
Can you talk about, when you say thrown into the deep end, talk specifically about what was so daunting about it?
Well, I had not really performed that much, and there were only a few places you could play, so I thought, I'll go there. Surely they'll listen, but they didn't listen because I wasn't playing hits, and I wasn't real loud. So I thought, okay, how am I going to get these guys to listen? That's when I was in the deep end, was when they weren't listening. So then I realized if I talk to them and relate the songs to their lives, they will listen, and that's what I did. And then they started coming week after week, and I developed a following.
This was just acoustic singer-songwriter stuff?
It was a what?
Like, what was it? A trio? Was it just you, singer-songwriter, showing up at these places?
It was me at the piano. That was it.
That's okay. So, like, it wasn't places like the Baked Potato. I'm trying to figure out the venues. Like,
oh no, it was called the Bitter End West. It doesn't even exist
the Bitter
anymore.
End West.
Yeah, it's like the New York, the LA version.
Yeah, but I bet there was some awesome jazz and cool gigs there too.
Oh, okay. Well, I was never a jazzer. I hate to break it to you, but
no, that's okay. I mean, it's all music.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, you're improvising. That's jazz. That's jazz.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Yeah.
I can tell by the rhythm of your speech that you're either a musician or you're a musician adjacent.
I'm just the spirit that is connected to the brother and sisterhood of your generation. I mean, and I'm operating on a completely different level. Wayne Henderson told me that from the Crusaders. He said, you're one of us, man. He's like, you're just doing it on a totally different level. And I'm not a musician.
That's great, but you sound like one.
Okay, well, I'm glad I do, because musicians are the most authentic people. But, to me, it's like, I just know that there were just I guess the overarching point is that there are so many limited at least you had opportunities to go out and figure out how to bring people, into your stories, how to get people to come see you. Like, there's not a lot of, and you might have gotten $5 or $10, but you got paid, right? I mean, you got paid.
Yeah, slightly. Sometimes they would just buy me dinner,
Yeah, if you didn't bring in the crowd. But I'm just saying that today there's this stifling of culture. You see it in all the urban centers. The gentrification has a lot to do with it. I guess I look at it and I say, I don't want people to I don't want the culture to be stifled or be done in a very superficial way, because if you forget where your roots are, then you don't know how to move forward. And you talked about the inner black African part of you wanting to turn on the radio and hear that soul and that gospel. Mm-hmm. That's what I want. Talk about why that rap got you so good, because it's like you painted that picture of the white girl just sort of scared to the fear or that they're the guilt, or I don't know, I don't get it, but maybe you could, because you grew up in a more authentic time,
Well, I mean, first of all, you talk about authenticity. The black culture has given us more than any other culture that has managed to find its way here, and the music is always authentic. I mean, granted, it comes from the church. I mean, when you hear Aretha, you can definitely hear the church in it. You can hear the church in Ray Charles. But somehow the church I went to didn't sound like that. So what I liked what they did. And I started playing, as I said, the gay clubs, and then I played other places. And mostly there, though, and a publisher wandered in named Roger Gordon and signed me to a publishing deal, and then I made demos, and I got a record deal, and then my record was on the radio, and Helen Reddy heard it. She was an artist who was real big in the 70s, and she recorded it and had a hit, and so I made 2 other albums for 20th Century Records, and then I took off a decade and wrote for film and TV, and in the 90s I made 2 or 3 more, and I've made 7 in all. So when you say I've been doing it for 4 decades, you're right about that, but there was some time I took off and I forgot who I was, and I wasn't authentic, and that's when I started writing mindless R&B in the 80s. And I met Nick Benet, who's quite a legend. He discovered Bobby Darin and Jim Croce and Jon Stewart and Lou Rawls.
Sure.
Roy President. And he produced, Linda Ronstadt.
Absolutely.
He said, God, what are you writing? This isn't you. I remember you from the 70s. I want songs that sound like you. So I started writing like myself again, because, if nobody's listening, Jake, it's kind of hard to do what you do if you feel there's no receipt point. And it seemed like everything was just dance music, But when he said that, I started writing again, and then I made more albums. And I'm really, really glad I met him, because I realized there were people out there. And then with the internet, they all found me, all my old fans. And now, luckily, I have new ones. But it was a blessing to have somebody validate who I really am as an artist, instead of wanting me to be a chameleon and change with the times.
That's interesting. You talk about the blues in the music that was lacking from the Anglo church or the white church. Is that right?
Exactly.
I mean, it was just very kind of like more like a cappella stuff, you think, in the white church?
Well, I was I went to an Episcopal church, which is kind of like the Church of England, and they're just all way too proper. I mean, the music was beautiful and everything when the choir sang it in harmony, but there wasn't anybody wailing, I'll tell you that much. You know, there wasn't anybody who you felt like they really meant it and had something serious to say about it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go to a black church, a lot of it is the music. And it's just, and, you know, even in the secular world, you can hear the church in it, is what I meant. It's just beautiful.
I dig. When was the first time you went to a black church?
Well, I went, the lady who was there before I was born, I guess you'd call her the maid, but as far as I was concerned, she was my other mother.
Right.
And she died holding my hand in 78. I flew her out to live with me when she was ill. But she, her name was Ernestine Jefferson, and she took me to her church, and that was a whole different deal.
Can you talk about that? I was born in 78.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, it was in Dallas, Texas.
Was it? I mean, what year would it be considered? Well, it was in a city. It wasn't in the country, so it wasn't. Was it sanctified?
Was it what?
Was it a sanctified church?
I don't know what that is.
Well, where the preacher might have a guitar, or they'd have a lot of.
Oh, no. It was an old-fashioned.
Okay.
With the choir, and then they sing gospel-y kind of music. It wasn't, what is now happening all over the place. As a matter of fact, in a week or so, I'm performing at a New Age church, a song from my newest album. One of the guys is singing it because it is in keeping with what they talk about there. But that's different from the old-fashioned black churches where they really wailed and got down with the music.
Oh man, I've just discovered these Willie Banks and the Messengers. I mean, this, if you want to know where, Leland Sklar and Chuck Rainey, more like.
Oh, Lee Sklar, yeah.
Well,
Lee played on.
No. We're gonna get that. That's how I discovered you. Is because.
Oh, really?
Well, because all the cats that I've interviewed played on your album.
Oh.
Okay, on the 20th Century album, and the pocket of music that I love is from the early 70s, pre-drum track, pre-disco. The cocaine was incredibly pure. I mean, there was this amazing, and then the story I want you to tell is also the song that you wrote that Helen Reddy, quote unquote, made into a hit, and then that ricochet effect where you got to make two more records. I mean, I didn't know there were two more Harriet.
No, she didn't make two more records.
No, I know. I'm saying I didn't know there were two more of you. Two more records of yours on 20th Century. I mean,
well, there's 6 more, but there were 2 more for 20th. But I was on that label, and Russ Regan really believed in me. It wasn't a matter of her having a hit, because I'd already made my second album by then. My record of Ain't No Way to Treat a Lady came out first. She heard it on the radio, and quite a bit later, she recorded it. So you only heard the Hollywood Town album. That's fine, but I mean, there have been 6 others.
Right. No. Can you talk about your sessions in the studio? Because the cats that I love are the jack of all trades. Some would say master of all trades. They could, they'd go in before the sun came up, and they'd leave when the sun went down. They might do a jingle. They might do a couple of studio sessions, or whatever it is. But they were. Was your album the one that you're sitting on the front porch? It's like a green background, and can you talk about that? Was that album cut live with everybody doing it at once? Was there any overdubs?
First of all, I'm not sure which album you mean, because I'm sitting on a star with a blue background, and then there's one where I'm sitting in a chair. That might be the second one. It's called She's Low Cloud.
That's what I have. That's the one.
Oh, I see.
That's the one. And so on the inside, all the accompanists is like Ed Green, Lee Sklar. It's all the cats that I've interviewed 500 cats. So I was like, if they're, I'm like, if they're bringing in that kind of, if they're contracting with that kind of rhythm section, those cats were very supportive. I just wanted you to talk about those like.
Yeah, they were wonderful. I mean, I remember Larry Carlson played guitar on my Hollywood Town album. I'm sure you've talked to him.
Larry's very scared to talk. Larry doesn't want to talk to me.
Oh, for heaven's sake. Well, Lee Sklar and I are still in touch.
No, Lee and I have done 5 hours of interviews, but I know that cat was always trying to bring some kind of positive role player in those sessions. I just want you to talk about, because I mean, you must have been nervous first time you were in before the Cloud album. Can you talk about how those guys put you at ease?
Yeah, I mean, they were just so excellent. What was terrifying was I was playing the piano with them. I mean, that was insane, but I was. And on the second album, a lot of it, I made Craig Derby play. You know him?
Oh, dude, Craig, no, I'm after him. He's the only cat from the section that I haven't connected with. I've gotten to Russ, Lee, and Cooch. Durgee's running for me. They're all going to fall, man. They're all going to fall.
Oh, sure. You'll get them all. I'm glad that...
so Durgee was who was the arranger on those albums? Was it Omardian?
Well, Nick DiCarlo did some.
Oh, God. Talk about that cat. Accordion player from Ohio. Because I interviewed Tommy LaPuma, his boy. So Nick DiCarlo was the man, dude.
And David Carr also did string lines. He was wonderful. He passed away a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm.
But I guess my original question was: were those early albums on 20th Century? Like, let's just take the She's Low Cloud. Were they all cut in the studio live?
Yeah, I mean, I think I overdubbed some of the vocals, but yeah, it's not like one vocal. And then I think as I recall, there was a time when Larry Carlson overdubbed the guitar part on Ain't No Way to Treat a Lady. But for the most part, they were all live with, the tracks, drum, bass, piano, and guitar, and then maybe we would overdub an instrument. And of course, the strings were later.
Yeah, that was probably done by Sid Sharp.
Probably. or Davis Sharp. But,
Right. So I mean, as far as walking in there, you had not met any of those cats before. And that was really the first time that you got a chance to connect with those guys. To me, these guys are like the heroes of our society.
I know they are. I mean, at the time, they were known, and I guess I wasn't, but I was too stupid to be intimidated.
Right.
I mean, it was my record, and
no, I'm there.
I just had a job to do,
Right. No, I think that's a very fair point. But then, can you talk a little bit about some of the TV and film work that you did? I know that it seemed like you still had some kind of your own individual voice. You hadn't lost it totally in when you went into the TV film.
No, not at all. I was able to. I did something for Disney for a record that The Little Mermaid made after they made the movie. Jodie Benson made a record, and I wrote a song that got on that. And then I co-wrote all the songs for The New Adventures of Pippi Longstocking.
Wow.
Which, a lot of kids grew up with that, and they all know the songs. And then I just did a show where I did a medley of all the film and TV stuff. I've done a lot of songs for Henry Jaglom, and I've been in a couple of his films, and I've done 4 music underscoring songs for 4 or 5 others.
Wow.
And then I did a new series called Jakers, The Adventures of Piggly Winks. I co-wrote the song, and it's in 30 countries. So that's nice. It's on PBS, which doesn't pay very much, but in 30 countries, so that helps a little bit.
That's really cool.
And,
I mean, that's still pretty cool.
Yeah, and then Delta Force 2, which is a Chuck Norris movie. You'll probably see that on my Facebook page. For Throwback Thursday yesterday, I posted a picture of me and Chuck Norris and Lee Greenwood, who sang it in the film.
Oh, wow.
That was funny. And then years later, some guy writes me and says, I want to use this for my gun video. I mean, it's like it was for when they dropped the drug dealers out of the plane, but it ended up over the credits, and then people have used it for other things. But
yeah, I think that movie actually, when I first watched it, like I had a couple nightmares from it. That Delta Force, but yeah, yeah. I mean, I was
pretty young,
but can you talk about the impact that cats like Ferlinghetti and Ginsberg had on you?
Well, I did start out as a poet, but I never really did poetry like that. I was in college, and I was able to take a poetry writing class by appointment with the professor, and I had to write all sorts of things like villanelles and things that are very strict forms. So the beat poetry and all that didn't really impinge too much on what I was learning. So by the time, because I was pretty structured lyrically, like I was brought up on Lawrence Hart, so of course everything had to be a perfect rhyme and all that. It wasn't just like whatever you feel. So,
stream of consciousness.
But, yeah, pretty much. But, I mean, they're great, and I'm married to a man who's a published poet, and he read all that stuff a lot more than I did.
You're telling me that did you ever get to see any cats that inspired you live, like when you were just in high school?
Yeah, well, Joni Mitchell is God as far as I'm concerned.
Well, she's the best. I mean, but explain at that time. I mean, it's so, we see her now, in some ways just trying to improve her quality of life. But I mean, can you talk about what inspired you at that time as her peer?
Well, let me start with Carole King. Carole King was a piano player,
Sure.
and I was a piano player. She was a female as a piano, so everybody, associates me with her. And I was fortunate enough to have her in my audience one time, and we had the same publisher. So she called my publisher and said, this girl's going to be a superstar. And then he dropped my option the very next week. I hadn't had a hit with them yet. Then they wanted me back, but I had already gone to another publisher. But anyway, Carole King was very generous in that way. She liked talent in others. Joni Mitchell I never really met, but the way she would write a melody with her voice being so limber, it was a miracle anyone else could really sing her songs. And when Joan Collins did it, it was okay, but there's nothing like hearing Joni Mitchell sing them. And the words said so much more than most people, and she would pack all these images and personal information. I teach songwriting, and people say, oh, that's too personal. I don't think it'll be universal. And I say, look, just go listen to Joni Mitchell. The more personal it is, the more universal, provided you have the craft. Because the truth is great, but the craft is necessary, too. Without one, the other is a disaster.
Absolutely.
You hear these people,
you have to be able.
You hear them at an open mic,
go ahead.
and they're being truthful, but they don't have the craft to pull it off. So you think that's really more information than I wanted to know.
I think people are uncomfortable because they're afraid of that very thing but they don't realize that over time with practice, you can use a lot of different ways of. I mean, I didn't do it with you, but on my live program on Saturdays noon to 2 Pacific, a lot of times if I'm interviewing, I'll write these long monologues, and to me it's like it developed my inner voice, which is a lot more about I mean, not bearing your soul, but not being yourself. Being yourself, and just that's what Monk used to talk to cats and just say, at the time he took a lot of flack for making up chords and how dissident his playing was, and he just always told cats, he goes, don't bend to that. I mean, go all the way. If you're going to be an artist, be yourself, because otherwise you're going to shortchange it, and you only get there by, for me, it was relentless pursuit and constant repetition, and ultimately getting behind the mic and getting into that position, like you said, where it's a job, but there's also a fearless quality to it. You have the chops to be there with anyone, and you're going to open them up, and you're going to do a good job extracting information from them. So I got a fellowship I'm going in the fall. The University of Arizona, I applied to the journalism school there, and I'm getting a fellowship to go back. I'm going to write a curriculum in interviewing practices for broadcasters. There's no there's no course designed for interviewing practices. So it would be very much, it would tie into songwriting only in the sense that I do want to create a class where they just have to be, they're always writing and then having to do a lot of public speaking and getting comfortable with, that's why I asked you that question about developing your individual voice. There are less places, listen, gay bars, you don't know how many cats played in burlesque clubs, to pay the bills. So like there were venues there. There were venues like the one you mentioned before that you played at. So there was a lot of opportunity for people to express themselves. And now I feel like you get into a lot of live settings, and sometimes because of the fact that cats don't have the quantity of opportunities, they feel like an onus to show off these huge technical chops. So it becomes more about like an exhibition than opposed to like transcendent music. And that's only because...
That's so true.
Yeah, because they feel pressure because they don't have that as many opportunities. Or like Larry Carlton, who won't talk to me, literally, I mean, he played in the studios all day. He'd go out at night just to play for free. I mean, it was that kind of, elasticity. And that's why you have cats. And then, of course, obviously a record industry, because your name, and you cut through when the listening medium was record, and they created an identity for you. Who knew that some journalist in 2014 was going to stumble across or 2016 stumble across a 20th century record and say, well, this is my pocket because I love this time period in music, and so I'm going to go after everybody and as many women as I can.
Right. Well, I just wrote an article recently for songwriting.net, this website that I write for, about how music is actually like a thumbprint of the composer. It is so them. Obviously in the beginning, like everybody, you go through different periods, you copy this one, you copy that one. But at this point, people will know immediately if it's a song I wrote. And hopefully it's not because I write the same melody over and over, but there are certain characteristics that make people like it, and that's pretty much in all of them. And I didn't realize that until I did a show recently, and one of the backup singers said, there's that interval, that leap or that thing you sometimes do. I just love that. And I thought, oh, well, maybe I've got a style finally after all this time. Yeah, there's a lot more to the whole thing than just the playing. I wish I could play better than I can. But if I'm not playing, I feel like, it's not really mine. I mean, standing at a mic and singing, everybody wants me to do that because they want to see me more, but it's not right. I feel like I have to be playing the songs I wrote when I'm singing them,
What's the current makeup of how big a band do you have?
I play keyboards. I have a bass player, Joe Romano, who is as close to Lee Sklar as anyone I have ever heard. I've had him for like over a decade. I mean, he's been with me for so long. And I have a cellist, Jennifer Richardson, who's wonderful, a flute player, Kelly DeSarla, and Scott Redmond plays percussion, not on every show, but recently. And I have two backup singers, Andrea Ross Green and Barbara Shane, and it's really pretty heavenly.
Oh, geez, that's a pretty nice outfit, going all the way from singer, songwriter, acoustic to a nice 7-piece band there.
Yeah, but I don't have a guitar player. Everybody rags on me for that, but my bass player, his viewpoint on it is, every time I bring someone in, he'll go, he doesn't have your heartbeat. And so I have to say, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I don't. I mean, I think it's okay. I think honestly, vibes or a flute like you have is totally cool. Especially if the bass player has a lot to say. He just probably doesn't. But this are any of the cats from your generation?
Well, I guess the bass player is, maybe. It's hard to know. I don't think much in terms of age. I know that the flute player and the cellist are probably more like your age. And I can't tell about the guys.
Yeah, I guess I mean, did any of those cats come on the scene when you first came on the scene?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I didn't know them then. I don't think they even lived here then. We're talking a long time ago, but
No, we're talking we're talking 4 decades. You're talking like early 70s, right?
Yeah, that's right. But I think I met the bass player 20 years ago.
Right.
So he's been around, but he lives in Orange County. As far as I'm concerned, that's out of town.
Yeah, right on. Oh, that's great. I mean, that place, L.A. is a kind of a nice. So, but what about like? Did you ever get to see like Alice Coltrane or any female jazzers or any transcendent jazz concerts? Because, like, to me, it's like, those guys are constantly losing where the one is, and
they know where the one is.
No, I mean let me get your, because this is the thing I'm always going after now. Whether it's some sort of just raga, like thesaurus, Coltrane-esque stuff, or free jam like psychedelic, Quicksilver Messenger Service, or whatever. What is your philosophy on that? Any note can be the one. A lot of those cats, the drummers especially, they say, hey, if you get lost in a free jam or a bass player and you forget where the one is, just know that any note can be the one. It'll always come back around. That's great. Yeah, and I mean, have you played in contexts where, whether you liked it or not, it was that free, or is that just something that you...
Well, let me say, I've heard it. I'm, as I told you, I'm not a jazzer, and I can't stand people who pose as jazzers when they're not. But,
wait, hold on. Wait. Can you tell me? Can you? What does that look like?
What does what look like?
What does a poser look like?
Well, a poser is somebody who's really a rock and roller, and they try to do jazz. And, yeah, they lose the one, but they don't know where it is. So that's what I mean. I don't pretend to do all of that because I don't.
No.
And I have tremendous respect for it because Chick Corea is a friend of mine. And I was at his wedding. His wife is a friend of mine, too, and she said, I may not always know where the one is, but Chick knows where it is. I mean, it was just great. I mean, this guy is Mr. Melody. He is
I cannot believe, it's so funny that first of all, his wife, I've done 3-hour-long interviews with John McLaughlin, and I believe Chick's wife played with John.
Oh, yeah, Gail Moran.
Oh, my God. Dude, and I would love to interview. That woman is a nasty player too.
Well, let me see if I can find her.
Yeah. No, it's the year of the woman. I've done Rita Coolidge, Evie Sands, Harriet Schock. I got I got a bunch of young ones, but I think the point is that I've interviewed Jean-Luc Ponty, I've interviewed McLaughlin, and I've always been fascinated. I mean, she was able to step in there after Jan Hammer left. And she did a heck of a job. But Return to Forever is a perfect example of a band that I am talking about. Total freeform improvisation, but that spiritual quality of music, where you lose yourself and you stop. I mean, the last time I interviewed John, it was like, he's just like, my whole goal in life is to stop thinking. Because if I'm thinking, then I'm not playing. For you, for you as a storyteller, it's a little bit different because you need to think, you need to get those stories together. But I really think that it's an industrious quality. Can you talk about any other cats that are doing something similar to what you're doing? I mean, again, I haven't interviewed a lot of women, so this is kind of interesting, the dual stimulation at what has become, I mean, let's face it. It used to be swing music. It used to be dance music. Now people go there to sit.
Before I tell you about some other people who are doing what I'm doing, because I know a lot of them. First of all, I teach songwriting, and I have for 30 years, and I know unbelievably good people. But I'm not sure that is exactly what you're looking for. But I've got to tell you that one time I was at a Ray Charles concert. And he brought up Miles Davis.
Oh, this is unbelievable. Go ahead.
I wrote a song about it. And the hook is straight men making love. Now, don't repeat that because, I've just broadcasted everywhere.
You did. You just broadcasted it out.
Yeah, but it's a very
I can take it out. I can take it out if you want. But no,
maybe you should. But
no. But did it ever get pressed on a record, or you just wrote a song?
No, it isn't. It's since my latest album. But it's just called. I can't remember what it's called. But anyway, because that's the hook. But the point is,
that's so great.
Ray brought up.
Right.
Miles. I mean, everyone was totally amazed. And every lick Ray would sing or play, Miles would answer. And the two of them together, that's when I got the phrase. And this was like 25 years ago. Or 30 years ago.
Yeah, that is much longer. Yeah, wow.
I was never able to develop the song around it until recently when I saw the very same thing with two other musicians, two other guys who just dug what the other one was doing. You know, it was just so beautiful to witness this, you know. So, but you want to know other singer-songwriters?
Well, I mean, I think that like people that are being industrious, that like you said, are being true to their voice.
Oh, absolutely. Here's an interesting woman. She was very well known in television. She produced and wrote for Cheers and Ellen. And she won the Emmy for the coming out episode of Ellen. And she had a huge career as a TV writer and producer. And about 15 years ago, she gave it all up and she was always a songwriter, but she became a full-time songwriter. She studied with me for a decade. Her name is Tracy Newman. She's really quite wonderful. And she's got a huge band, and she plays all the time.
Wow.
And you might just want to check her out because she's a good interview also.
Oh, right on. Yeah, I mean, to me, it's like, you know, can you talk about, well, I guess one final question here in part one for you is, can you talk about your concept of love and how you bring love to the world?
Oh, my goodness. Well, I think love is a verb, you know. Mm-hmm. It's something you do. It's a spiritual thing, in my opinion. It comes from who you really are. And if you are open to people and you are willing to see them for who they really are, it's impossible not to love that person. But if you see him or her as a stick figure and a straw, you know, target, then you'll find something wrong. And whether this is on a personal microcosm within your own life or on the global level, you will not be happy because you will not be able to love. And as Carson McCullers once said, it's not the beloved who is blessed. It's the lover. Because when the beloved walks into the room, the light goes on for the lover. So the person who loves is truly lucky. And the one who is loved, well, I hope he loves in return. Otherwise, he's missing all the fun.
in your career, even maybe not, now, but I mean, did you ever feel at a certain point where you were doing something as an artist that nobody else was doing?
Yeah, yeah, I did, and I'm not sure it helped me. But
Well, what was it?
But no, I was writing songs that had the intelligence of a Broadway song, but the melody of a pop song, and I was playing them alone at the piano, so nobody could say I was folk because that was guitar stuff, even though Bob Dylan had serious lyrics going on. But so I was neither this nor that, and I didn't come from one pure strain like jazz
Right.
or R&B. Well, that's a mishmash, but like blues or jazz. So they couldn't say she's a blank artist. So, and pop then became really kind of strange. I just saw Beautiful the other night, Carole King.
Right.
I was signed to the same publisher as Barry Mann and Cynthia Weil and Carole King. We all had the same publisher. We're at Screen Gems. So I knew Barry and Cynthia pretty well and everything, and I just came along a little later, so I never had to write really moronic, as they referred to them, songs. But of course they weren't. They were King and Goffin were always really good, and so were Barry and Cynthia. And the songs have been through time and are still good.
Yeah. What was the term you used for? Did you say moronic?
Well, yeah. In the musical, don't quote me because I don't remember the exact line. But Jerry Goffin was kind of upset that he had to write down, so he finally just wrote what he wanted to, like, "Will you still love me tomorrow?" The lyrics were simple, but they really had something to say.
Exactly. I mean, they weren't necessarily deep. It was not like this beautiful poetic thing, but the lyrics there was a deepness to it. There was an emotion quality that really hooked people.
Yeah, and so I came up a little after that. So in the 70s, it was okay to have something to say. But the way I put it together was because I was raised on Cole Porter and Rodgers and Hart, so there were internal rhymes and a lot of craft, and people didn't quite know what to do with that. Thank God Wes Regan liked it, and I made 3 albums for him. But anyway, you asked me if I'd ever done something nobody else was doing. It's not because I was ahead of my time. It was because I was a combination of things they weren't used to putting together.
Well, that's just perfectly stated, because at this point, that's what I'm doing, and I'm not sure if it'll ever reap, huge financial success, but I can say it's invigorating to know that I'm so far out, and what I'm doing, like you said, you couldn't pigeonhole your style, and as you can see with my interviews and what I disseminate, I'm going from everyone from Bill Monroe to Harriet Schock to John Coltrane. I mean, you can't.
That's wonderful.
You can't. I'm not a jam band journalist. I'm not a jazz journalist. I'm a music journalist. And there's,
right.
It's interesting how but you really came up, your beginning of your career. I just listened to side one of She's Low Clouds, which is just beginning. It's growing on me like a fine wine, really. It's just, to me, the conformity and the pigeonholing and the genre-specific part of the industry started to really get its teeth in around the time that you started to come up. I mean, they wanted to start pegging people as certain artists, and it started to hurt. In my mind, it started to hurt the elasticity of the music. I mean, you literally got in my mind, right before labels started to dominate music.
Well, yeah, let me tell you who was dominating at the time was radio. Radio dictated exactly what you could do. And I had disc jockeys tell me, I never dreamed you had anything to say until my wife made me take home the album. And I heard that it wasn't really a polished Anne Murray album. It really, but you had all these strings, because my melodies and harmonies make the producer always want to add strings. And so it sounded like something other than what it was, and it didn't get the kind of airplay I needed. Of course, I was very close to getting that. I think I explained that last time when the music director quit right before he was going on my record, and it was Ain't No Way to Treat a Lady, and then the other station didn't go on it because the LA station didn't, so I lost San Francisco and LA. And the promotion man from 20th, who now lives in Nashville, is still upset about the fact that we almost had a hit. For me, as an artist. But the point is, radio was very hard with my record, because they would hear it and think unless they listened to the lyric, which they didn't once they heard all those strings. They just thought it was something else. What was the tune that you were trying to be a hit, that you thought could be a hit? Well, we were releasing Ain't No Way to Treat a Lady, and then the music director, who had convinced the program director to go on the record, had a bit of a chemical problem, so he wanted it sped up, if you follow me. So we recalled the record, Russ Regan sped it up and reissued it as the single. It was Ain't No Way to Treat a Lady, but long before Helen had it. And then the program director had a fight with the music director and quit, and so he didn't go on the record, and the San Francisco station that was going to go on it, if the LA station went on it, they wouldn't go on it then. And so we lost it because he had a fight with the other guy. But it was Ain't No Way to Treat a Lady. Then a band called LAX, which was kind of an R&B band. Anyway, they had a minor little thing with it, but then about a year later, Helen Reddy had heard my version on the radio, and she recorded it, and she had, she was on Capitol. I used to get letters saying, I can't find your record in the stores and stuff when I would do television, because the distribution at 20th wasn't the best. And I think I told you that Rolling Stone said if Patty Hearst had wanted not to be found, she should have been on 20th Century Records.
How did you become stronger because of this experience? I sort of feel like I'm beginning this journey towards the unknown. It must have been heartbreaking in some ways to have no control of people getting their egos involved, having fights, and then everything falling apart. So how did you pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and keep going?
Well, that was the first album. You never heard that. That was possibly
I haven't. This one I found a tattered copy in a Goodwill store. It's the greatest album I've ever had in my life.
Oh, that's so sweet.
She's Low Clouds.
You should really hear Hollywood Town. But anyway, that's his first album.
Right on, yeah.
Yeah, and this was the one that we almost broke. So how I dusted myself off is we made She's Low Cloud. And then we made You Don't Know What You're In For. That's the third album on 20th. And then, so eventually I just got dropped from the label because the third album, Gene Page produced. Oh. And he is also a string arranger, so he hired himself to do so many strings that the album ended up costing, oh my God, that's my cat playing the piano. Anyway, the album ended up costing $320,000 in the 70s.
Paige,
so, of course, I could never make that back. So.
That's ridiculous. I feel Gene Page, it was such an, I never met him. I love him because he did so.
Oh, he was wonderful.
He did so much amazing work with Barry White and made a lot of 20th century stuff is very obscure, and it didn't get distributed well at all in comparison to Polydor or Capitol or anything like that. But he was responsible. But the budgets. I was talking to Michael Omardian, okay, and that dude with Steely Dan, they had a budget of like $500,000 in the mid-'70s. It was ridiculous. There was so much.
It's true.
But of course, Steely Dan was a known entity where Harriet Schock was just low in the clouds.
Yeah, and see, he was producing and arranging, so he hired himself as an arranger, I think. I mean, that's the only way I can figure out how he got to be so expensive. But anyway, so it was with great heartache that Russ Regan had to drop me from the label, because every day he would go to work, his wife at the time would say, "How could you not have broken Harriet Schock? She was your Carole King." So, of course he divorced her. I'm not sure it was related to that.
Well, no, I mean,
anyway,
can I ask you a question about Carole King? I haven't had a chance to interview her. I mean, do you feel, because Russ Regan's heart was in the right place, but, Carole had two things that I'm curious about. I mean, one, she had essentially we know the group, the Section, which a couple of the cats show up on your albums, Durgy and Sklar. She had a working band. She had a working band, so she also, I assume, had tours to promote the albums. Did you have a consistent working band, and were you able to go on tour to promote any of the 3 albums you made?
Well, first of all, by the time she had her first, by the time she made Tapestry, she had so many hits under her belt, everyone knew who she was.
Yeah.
So secondly, I was a complete unknown when I made mine. And yes, I did tour the first year, and I played the Cellar Door and the Bitter End West. I mean, not West, Bitter End. A lot of, no, wait, I didn't play the Bitter End. It was something else in New York City. We're talking over 30 years ago.
No, this is important. But, you got to the Cellar Door in D.C., and then you went up the coast to New York, and then you played, like, the Village Gate, possibly, or?
No, it was, it's still there. I'll think of it.
The Bitter End is still there. That might have been it.
Yeah, but it wasn't the Bitter End. I played the Bitter End West at the gay bars in the 70s before.
Oh, that's right. We talked about that's one of the greatest stories of all time. Yeah. But so you did go on it, and who was in that band?
Well, okay, David. Do you remember David Carr? I mentioned he did string arrangements. He joined when Mike Boddicker left. Okay, remember Mike Boddicker?
Boddicker. These guys are these are the cats, man. I mean, where are?
I gave him his. Yeah, I was his first band he was in, and Don Whaley. You wouldn't know him. He played bass in a Hawaiian shirt and was more visible than I was, stuck behind the piano. I assure you. But listen to this: in New York, I played the Schaefer Music Festival, and I opened for Benny Goodman. Now, Benny Goodman was not exactly a household word even then, but people were coming backstage and saying to him, "Benny, this is your best show since '36." Wow, it was crazy.
Wait, are you saying? Hold on for a second. Are you saying that Goodman's lore only grew after he died?
No. What I meant was, he was no longer a household word.
I dig. That was your best show from '36. Since '36.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Well, I know since then. So, Jake, did I mention to you? I think the song "Mama" is on the album you have.
I'm looking. Yeah, my buddy Ron Tutt played drums on it.
Okay. So that was the song that quieted down the 7,000 people in Central Park, because they weren't there to see me. They were there to see Benny Goodman or whoever, and they had balloons and there were children. But when I sang "Mama," I really got them.
Wow.
Now later on, Helen Reddy covered that song and everything, but I knew that was going to be an important song for me. Even though it wasn't on the album I was promoting, I had written it. So I sang that.
I'm looking here. David Carr played organ on the studio version of "Mama." But that's not the tune that from the Hollywood from the first album that was potentially going to be a radio hit. What was that was the other tune we were talking about?
Ain't No Way to Treat a Lady.
Ain't No Way to Treat. And then Mama, boy, I'm going to have to really. So that's side 2. I'm still marinating on side 1 here. I can't even get to side 2. So Mama brought him in and really hooked him. What is that feeling like when you reel an audience in like that? I mean, can you put it in perspective where, being on the bandstand at a place like Central Park, with, people for miles and miles and miles and to get the vast majority of their attention because they're listening?
Well, it's an experience I haven't had in a long time, because now when I do a concert, they're there to see me. But I remember distinctly what it was like in the gay clubs and all of this when they were not there to see me. So the way it worked in the Bitter and West was to talk to them. But at Central Park, they couldn't really hear me talking that much because all of the echo and everything. So when I say Mama is the bottom line, and they kind of started quieting down, Mama makes the water wine, then I thought, oh, thank God I've got a song that will make them listen. Because, they were outside, they were children with balloons, and they didn't care about me up there. But that song did quiet them down. And then they listened from then on.
I love that. That is, what a great... So that was the tour after She's Low Clouds, right?
No, that was the tour after Hollywood Town. I just happened to have that song written already.
Hollywood Town. I mean, that was the third album. I've never... What was that?
No. That was the first album. Hollywood Town was the first album.
Hollywood Town was the... That's right. Yeah. She's Low Clouds. I'm sorry, what was the third one?
You don't know what you're in for.
Exactly. I have never seen that either. There's a lot more of this shock story to get to. I mean, this is unbelievable. Okay. This is really quite remarkable. So, I mean, can you talk about, like, a lot of people say the road can eat people up. Did you feel that it was something that if you could have continued, if you had stayed with 20th Century, if Gene Page hadn't milked the budget for all it was worth, would you have wanted to be to go on the road and do lots of touring? Was that something that you were getting off on?
I loved performing, and I love performing in different places. I played Philadelphia at the Bijou.
Oh, I love that club. Are you kidding? That was where Grover Washington Jr. used to play.
Well, I opened for some... They were called the Madcap Comedy Group, and they were supposed to be improv, but they rehearsed all the way through my sound check, so I never got one. And every night they marched the audience out into the parking lot, and he set his hand on fire in a garbage can, and that was, I mean, you never knew who you were going to be put with.
Oh my! I mean, did you ever get put with anything? I mean, first of all, I actually think that's kind of awesome. I know maybe a little bit insane for like yourself, who's just But to me, it's like that sort of eclecticism. Did you ever wind up on a bill with anybody that like that would be considered comparable to your folk rock blues? Jazz.
Well, in the cellar door, yeah. I was with the Seldom Seen. I'm so different from them, but they're at least really good.
That's right. That's right. That's the point. Were you with somebody who was at least really good? That's right.
Yeah. And then at the Troubadour, I opened for a week for Waylon Jennings, if you can believe that.
Wow, that is fantastic.
And do you know? No, you weren't born, much less in L.A., but there was this guy named Cal Worthington, and he had this commercial. This is Cal Worthington. He was selling cars, and he always had a little dog Spot with him. Cal Worthington and his little dog Spot. Well, Cal Worthington was there to see Waylon Jennings, but his little dog Spot was a girl who had on a garter belt for a skirt. It was very strange, but I got to play to all these people who would never have come. I got to meet Roger Miller. We hung out, and everybody came to see him. So it was really neat. I mean, This is probably the biggest mistake I made was I knew I wouldn't be able to remember his name. But at the time, John Denver had a manager who became a huge film producer. I'm going to look up the name and give it to you, but I can't find it right now.
Sure.
Anyway, Russ Regan said around the time of my third album, you really need another manager because my publisher was my manager and he really didn't know how to manage. So he said, so-and-so wants to manage you. And because I asked him, and he said, yeah, he didn't have a white chick singer. Well, that kind of turned me off because it wasn't because it was me. It was because he didn't have a white chick singer. So instead of choosing him, I chose Bullets Durgam. So he's a wonderful man and got Frank Sinatra his first record deal and got Audrey Meadows the part on The Honeymooners. I mean, he was a legend.
Yeah, sure.
But this other guy could have put me on tour with John Denver, So I made some mistakes along the way, but I'm really happy, and so whatever I did, it must have been okay because this is the life I want, and I've got it. So
well, I'll tell you, I love your attitude. I think that I can tell by your students' faces, that they are you're helping a lot of people channel their own inner voice and trying to get that out there. And I just find it to be creative. I mean, it's being resourceful without a lot of resources. I mean, you don't have, the only cats that have major budgets are, the guys like Neil Diamond and, Crosby or Stills and Nash, guys that have just, made mistakes, but they've just continually put out huge amounts of work over time. I just like the fact that you're doing it in a much more indigenous way. And I mean, can you talk about how you develop a caseload of students? Do they is it mainly word of mouth, or are you the go-to person?
Well,
go ahead.
That's a good question. I mean, if I were just teaching, I would have a lot more students, but I'm writing a musical, that I was hired to write. I'm doing I'm doing everything. I'm still performing. And Pat Whiteman did a show of all my songs. We did it at the E Spot in L.A., it's Vitello's. And we sold, we sold out with 120 people there. And we paid the band well, and we're doing the show again on August 31st as a fundraiser for Bob Staines' club, the Coffee Gallery backstage, because he gave me my start when he owned the Ice House.
Wow.
So there are a lot of reasons, there are a lot of things that I'm doing that take my time from promoting teaching. At the moment, someone's making me a new website, and maybe people around the country will realize, and around the world, actually, that I teach online. But as I say, it's not my main gig. It's just something I absolutely love. It's a pay-it-forward kind of thing. And, I have a book out there, and then they're making another one from all the articles I've written and everything. So it's great to be able to get people interested in the craft and not just constant repetition of one riff over and over, So my students are writing some of the best stuff I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
And so I get to hear it. I get to hear it born, and it's really quite wonderful. But you asked how I get referred. Yeah, it's mostly word of mouth. I don't advertise. I really should. But my articles are up on websites, and sometimes people will reach that way. But boy, if you have any ideas, I could use them.
Well, I'll tell. I think you just made you made your own point. I mean, you're not in a position where you really need to go full throttle with it. I mean, you're doing a lot of things right now. If you were just,
I couldn't really teach full time because I don't have the time. But I could certainly do more online because when people enroll on my online course, I can do that at midnight. It doesn't have to be when I'm working with a collaborator on a show or something like that. So rehearsing with a band for a performance, it can be in my off time. And so that's what I would like more of, because these people are stuck in Podunk, Iowa with no help, and they're trying to write songs. And my step-by-step method could give it to them in an instant but they don't know I'm here. So, that would be good. But my new website's going to cure all that.
No, I just I kind of wanted to just ask you about what I talked to you about with Stanley, which was your idea of giving back and why it makes you feel good to give back and help other people.
Well, it's a weird thing. Helping other people has sort of always been my motive, even as a songwriter. Because when people come to me after a show and they've been laughing and they've been crying, and I can look at their faces and tell somebody duplicated their experience in a way that they know they're not alone, this is why I did it in the first place. So teaching is just a natural outgrowth of that. I will help them do the same thing for other people, and the ripples of the ocean just keep going out.
Can you give an example of one of the earliest times that you were hesitant to help someone because you wanted to protect yourself, but you did help them and it turned into something even bigger? I guess the whole point is the more you give, the more you get back.
Yeah. Well, when they called me from USC and said, please teach songwriting, we want to start a department. We're talking 1986 here. And I said, well, it can't be taught. So the next year they called me again and said, you must teach this because we want to start a thing and we're not going to do it without you, blah, blah. I'm sure it was all a lie, but I bought it. And so I was very reluctant, not because I would create competition, but because I really thought you were born with it. And so what I did was I created a system, a step-by-step method, which I've refined considerably over the years. And I trick people into doing what I do naturally. And so it turned out at USC these kids weren't really as interested in learning as I needed, but they learned a little bit. But once I quit there and started teaching grown people who had hit a wall, who really wanted to get better and go to the next level in their songwriting, then I saw people just take off. And it's hard to see them leave, even when they're just incredibly good, because I get so attached to them. But when I see them in concert and people are just dying from their songs, I think, I didn't do that, but I certainly helped that.
Exactly. That's great. That's really great.
Yeah.
I mean, I think also when you are at a block or you're at a, artistic sort of, plateau, and then you can help somebody, inspire them to get out of that loop and then continue to grow. That's just creating good dharma and karma for you along the way as well, which is probably why you are in such a good headspace. Which juxtapose that to I talked to Jim Keltner the other day, and he's one of my confidants, and it's like, dude, there are cats that have like monstrous resumes, just been played on thousands of albums, have done all the tours, traveled the world, have gold records, all this stuff, and they're miserable. They're miserable because in some ways they can't accept the fact that the industry has changed, or they are too old now, or the ship has moved on, and they are resentful because they still want to play, but they're not happy. They can't see all the good work that they've done. And that's a lot of people,
right.
And I think that is something to keep in mind, where if you don't give back and you are, maybe for lack of a better word, just a jerk, then that's going to create karma for you down the road. It's not going to provide you good inner chi or good energy, and you're going to wind up being resentful. And so I think that I think it's invigorating to connect with you, because I just also think the idea of doing these songs, organic song creation, getting the audience involved, it's to me, it's absolutely essential. You have to do some sort of multi-stimulation in this era to get people off their technology and into the music. To me, it's very progressive stuff. I mean,
Wow,
if you don't have the name recognition of Tony Bennett or Joni Mitchell, or you need to do this other stuff, and you're doing it. It's really smart.
There's a common denominator to everything you said, and that is, I don't think people realize that art is communication. Now, Chick understands that because I heard him say that on a video like 20 years ago. I help my students communicate all the way through the writing of a song. A lot of people stop communicating and start songwriting or playing or whatever, and they're into the craft of it, but they forget there's a receipt point out there. There's someone who has to get it. And if you don't do that, you lose the audience, you lose the song or whatever you're writing or playing. Now, these guys who have played on all these things and are miserable, they probably are not really creating anything anymore. They're side men. They were never writers. They never taught someone else how to do it. So there's no one they're communicating with, and they're alone. And this is why they're miserable.
That's right. That's right. I mean, and like Stanley said, those cats are not ones that he is inclined to hang out with or even collaborate with, because you have to still. I guess that would be the. Could you? I don't know. Did we talk? Did I ask you in part one about your concept of love?
Oh, I think I ended the discussion with something that was really good, and now I can't remember what it was.
No, that's fine. No, I wasn't sure if I already asked you that question. Then that's. I'll have to go back and listen to it. But actually, I wanted to ask you. It kind of caught me off guard. But how did you develop a friendship with Gail Moran?
Well, first of all, we go to the same church.
Which is what church? You went to the same church? I mean, or you go to...
No,
yeah.
We're both Scientologists.
Wow, that is so cool. Unbelievable.
Well, not really. I mean, for me, it's been 35 years. Mm-hmm. And I don't know when but I remember I was at their house one time, and this young man said, I came to America because Chick Corea thanked L. Ron Hubbard on all of his albums, so I came to study piano with him.
Well, they were doing, Stanley and him were doing L. Ron Hubbard albums in the early 80s. It was like music. It was how did you find Scientology?
Well, I was dating a man with whom I was having a problem, and he was in an acting class that Milton Casellas taught, and the person who was teaching the class said, go home and do this, and we did that, and it worked, and I said, well, what is this? Because I was convinced I knew all about Scientology, because I knew nothing, but someone had approached me on the street and tried to have me fill out a survey, so as far as I was concerned, I knew all about it. So when I found out it was Scientology, I was horrified because, I had stayed away as long as I could. And then I was understudying a part called Getting My Act Together and Taking It on the Road. And I wasn't really an actor, but because I was a songwriter, and they asked me to audition, and I got the understudy part, and I was stuck in a hotel room in San Francisco for months. And I took a book called Science of Survival, which is certainly not the first book most people read by L. Ron Hubbard, but when I read it, I said, okay, all right, this is really something I want to know more about. So that's how I got involved with it. And then I don't know how I met Gail. She was just, at Celebrity Center here. And then when I was in Florida studying, we would have these Friday night jams, and she would make me stand there and improvise on Somewhere Over the Rainbow.
Oh, where are the cassettes of? I need audio of this. Was this stuff? This has to be. This is So, but going back to the book for a minute.
Yeah.
Do you remember? What was it about the themes that resonated with you at that time that connected you to Scientology?
Well, if I said what it was, it would use a lot of words you don't know, and I feel bad about that.
No. I mean, if you can just in lay term or very like spiritually.
Okay.
I mean, was it? I guess here's the point. Instead of vernacular terminology, was it because there was you were at a certain point in your life where it hit you, or was because of the actual text itself?
It was the actual text, because I had done everything. There's something called actualism, not actualization, but actualism. I'd done I was looking for an actual spiritual path that was scientific, not something that I had to believe.
Right.
So when I ran across this, and I saw how spirit moves into physical stuff and pulls back and learns from it and moves in again and learns from it, I thought, oh my God, and like I teach a step-by-step method, this was something that you could actually do. It's an applied religious philosophy. It's not something you have to believe. It's something you can use, whether you believe it or not, and see if it works. So it was just so mind-blowing. And now this is 1986, so I've been studying it ever since, and I'm telling you, I know a lot about it now, and it just helps in every area of life. And it's whatever the press has to say is because way back in the 70s, I was just hearing this on the radio. Some guy has this book, and he's not a Scientologist. He's just somebody who's researched that time period, and apparently the CIA seriously wanted the technology of L. Ron Hubbard, and Hubbard said, absolutely not. It is to free people, not to enslave them. And Henry Luce, who was head of Life magazine, was furious about the fact that LRH would not give up his secret. So the press has been against him ever since. And now, of course, psychiatry and the pharmaceutical companies have entered the enemy camp, and they want to try to close down the Church of Scientology, which will never happen because it grows by leaps and bounds every day the minute someone reads a book. So I don't mean to sound like, I'm crazed on the subject, but it's very upsetting to me that people I know who could be helped with this and could be living their lives much more fully will read some stupid article by somebody who knows nothing, and then they won't do it. So, I mean, it's like if you had an amazing, cure for something, and someone won't even taste it because somebody said something bad about it. That's really criminal as far as I'm concerned.
You know what? I'll tell you, it is, without being too self-absorbed, I think, in my own world, I think it happens on many levels, and it is criminal. I do wonder, without knowing anything about it, so from an individual perspective, I actually think that it's something that I would like to learn more about, but it seems to me that it does get complicated within a partnership or with between two people. Like if somehow it just comes across as there's a lot of control, and that's all. I guess that's the only thing I can say is that it seems to me that like for instance, like also just the idea of, I talked to Stanley about this in depth in part 2 of our interview, and he talked about being at a point in his career where he was too young to be feeling as old as he was. He was a substance abuser. He was, just living life vicariously, and he was exhausted, and I think he felt like he wanted to be around for a while. And he found, Chick introduced him to Scientology, and he got full into it, head on into it. And then over time, there's this whole thing about, again, this is my very superficial understanding. What Stanley said was that, it's complete sacrilege to leave Scientology. And if you do, then you can you're excluded completely. And
no, that's not true.
Okay, but I mean,
people do.
he said that to me too. I mean, that's the perception. Whatever is the truth.
Yeah.
I really have felt a wonderful connection. I don't even care. I'm a Taoist. I mean, I received the Tao. I know
Well, good. That's Eastern. Yeah.
and you know what? What you talked about, this energy, the spiritual energy pulling in and out. I mean, I love it. I think it's spot on, and I am very open minded about it. And I'm not scared about it. It's just, there is this conception. I don't know about younger cats, but from that '70s period when it did get vilified and when it created these big enemies, there are people that still are just like, for whatever reason, horrified by the whole thing. And I'm trying to figure out still why that is the case.
This is what I say to people. Would you want to study Judaism by reading Nazi propaganda? And that's what people are doing. They're finding out about Scientology by reading what the enemy has to say. Go to Scientology.org and poke around. Nobody has to know you're there. You can take courses for free. You can do all sorts of things, and nobody will think you're a Scientologist if you're worried about that. Or if you're worried about, like you say, two people, and one of them, I have, my closest friend is a Scientologist, and her husband is not, and it's no problem. It's just that he sees her using the tech of Scientology, and so he starts using it too because it works, but he doesn't consider himself a Scientologist. And I know lots of people who have left and done, haven't studied anymore. But if you ask them if Scientology helped them, they would absolutely say yes.
Well, this is phenomenal. I actually, can you talk about, so Gail and you developed trust? I mean, you guys were doing improvisational, like show tunes and like Broadway show tunes, like she was playing B3 and you were scat singing over the top of it. I mean, this is unbelievable.
No, somebody else was playing the piano. Someone named Pat Marks, who's an amazing piano player, and we were just all on stage, and she made me improvise. She knows I hate that kind of thing,
you improvise.
Oh, yeah. So she would just take the mic over to me. I had to do something. And so afterwards, Chick said, I heard you were improvising. They know that I'm a pop writer and that I'm not up there scatting my butt off,
Right.
But it was fun, and it broke me out of some patterns. I loved it. When Gail says to do something, you do it. You know what I mean?
Wow. She's a tough cook. Anybody that could play in the Mahavishnu Orchestra has to be a serious, but also has to be somebody with a huge heart, too, because I know McLaughlin. I've done 3 hours with McLaughlin, too. And between him and Stanley, I mean, just the biggest hearts in the world. And I know that, you're like that and Chick's like that. And all the luminary cats, they get to a point where their playing is exceptional. There's many amazing players, but to get to the luminary level, you have to be a better human being, in my mind.
Thank you. I completely agree with you. You've heard her sing, right? I mean, her voice is just...
Oh, I mean, the woman is, she's one of the best kept secrets in the world until she comes on the Jake Feinberg show.